I just saw a comment from Gabby there about starting at home, drilling your relatives or your housemates or your flatmates or whatever you've got. That's a great idea there. If you can get them to sit nicely in a line for you and have a go at choral drilling, that would be amazing. So yeah, there are a couple of comments in the chat box coming up and a few questions as well that we can have a look at. I just wanted to talk through the answers to the polls with you. So at the start, I asked how many people were scared of drilling and how many weren't. So actually that was a lot better than I expected. Only 54% of you said yes, you were a bit frightened of drilling. I thought it might be sort of like 70s or 80s, and it was just over half. So that was really good to hear. But even if you were one of those 54%, hopefully now you feel like you've got a lot more confidence because you've got some techniques that you can really put to practice in your classrooms. And the second one was, I drill my students every day, or I'm going to drill my students every day. This was fantastic to see that 88% of you are going to be a yes from now on. And I saw in the chat box, Maria was saying, yeah, I do drilling every day. Absolutely. That's what students need, little and often. You saw in the second conditionals little snippet, that was probably about 3 or 4 minutes long. That's the most I've ever done in just drilling itself. Normally, I kind of like pop the drilling in for, between 30 and 60 seconds at maybe 4 or 5 different points in the lesson, rather than try and spend 3 or 4 minutes just on drilling solidly. But my Arabic students just needed it so badly, I felt it was worth their while. And hopefully now as well, just to make drilling a little bit interesting and to give your students a bit of variety, the final poll was, I know at least 5 different techniques to drill. And I'm happy to report 100% of you said yes. Woohoo! So I'm taking that as a really good sign. And well done for those of you who've got fast fingers for trying to get some of those examples into the chat box as well when we were going through. So I'm happy to take some questions. Should we have a little look in the questions box and see what is already going on? Okay, this is, I think, a really good point. Maria has said that she tends to work a lot on drilling functional language. I think that's really, really important, Maria, because the functional language is normally your whole chunks, your phrases, your sentences. And again, intonation is often a really important part of teaching functional language. So I'm really, really delighted to hear that you do loads of work on drilling, especially with functional language and pronunciation. I completely agree. That's a great thing to do. And then the other question of like, where and when do you think choral drilling works best? So as I mentioned in the video, I think choral drilling is really important if you're teaching vocabulary, when you've dealt with meaning, you've asked them if it's a noun, a verb, or a preposition, or whatever, to try and do a little bit of a little bit of drilling of the new vocabulary. But specifically, if you're working on grammar and target language, then in the language clarification stage of your lesson, you need to make sure you're including a minute or two of drilling. Normally as well, when you're doing answers to controlled feedback tasks, that's another opportunity to encourage the whole class to do some choral drilling, so you can get one correct answer from a student and then maybe involve the rest of the class in repeating the answer if it's correct, or if it's incorrect, maybe inviting another student to peer correct, and then again that gives you an opportunity to model the right answer. And then again, maybe some choral drilling just before you let the students move into freer practice without you, because they need to be able to have their confidence built up enough to manage without a teacher when you put them into breakout rooms, or if it's face-to-face teaching, if they're on the little groups and tables. So certainly, in the latter half of the lesson, I would expect lots and lots of choral drilling to be taking place. And maybe we can also talk here about Gabby's comment about opportunistic drilling. Gabby, do you want to jump in and just say something about that, since that was your invented phrase? Great phrase, by the way.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, I can hear you. You're a bit quiet.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's better.
Because I'm shy, Susie, as you know. Yeah, I mean, I really feel now that I'm inventing the phrase, but I don't really feel like I am inventing it. But anyway, so how I mean is just like we talk about opportunistic teaching, right? So when opportunities arise, I feel the same could be the case with drilling. So, I mean, we typically drill in the controlled practice, kind of at the stage of controlled practice, and then we obviously drill when we correct errors, etc., etc. But then what happens throughout the lesson? Like very often, there are opportunities for us to drill. So my question is, do you ever do that? Or let me rephrase it. Is it always a dedicated slot in the lesson that you have for drilling, or do you drill throughout the lesson without kind of putting it on your lesson plan because you drill when an opportunity arises?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Gabby. And for me, because I'm an experienced teacher and quite an assertive, some might say bossy teacher, I don't have any problem in kind of interrupting, what was going on in the lesson to be able to quickly fix something that I think I heard wrong. So, I mean, you might consider that as well a little bit of immediate error correction. Sometimes this is one of the problems I think with teaching English as a foreign language. There's lots of terminology and there's lots of acronyms, like
Yeah,
letters standing in for phrases, and I think this can confuse newly
yeah,
qualified teachers sometimes. But I mean, you
yeah,
might as well want to call it, immediate error correction, because if you hear an error on the spot, or
yeah,
if a student is just learning something and is having a go at saying it, that's a great opportunity, exactly as you say,
yeah,
just to
yeah,
kind of hop on that and work on sort of like, fixing
yeah,
it before they've got time to,
yeah.
have that mistake fossilized into
Yeah,
something more
but
serious.
now my question, Susie, is how because obviously as an experienced teacher, you kind of have this expertise now, and you know when to step in and when there is an opportunity for drilling.
Mm.
But what would you say to newly qualified teachers? How uh, when can they when ca- how would you make them see the opportunity? I mean, what advice would you give newly qualified teachers to actually see this opportunity and to use it?
Yeah, I think
It's a
listening.
tricky question. Sorry,
No, no,
sorry,
no. It's a
Susie.
great question, Gabby. It's absolutely a great question, because I'm sure this is something that a lot of newly qualified teachers, really struggle with. I'm sure you have the same experience on the CELTA, that often monitoring for candidates is quite challenging, just because if there's two or three voices talking at the same time, it can be very difficult for candidates to hear mistakes. So when we're monitoring, I might hear mistakes coming out left, right, and center because my brain is tuned to listen out for them. But maybe as a newly qualified teacher, you haven't had much exposure yet to students' errors. And so listening really carefully, active listening, I think is very, very important. And then thinking about the aim of what it is that the student is doing. So maybe, for example, if it's feedback to the lead in, the warm up part of the lesson, and you just want to get students chatting, you want to get the enthusiasm high, you want to get the energy high, I probably would choose not to do any opportunistic drilling at that point, because I just want to make the lesson exciting. And I feel like if you start in with correction a bit too soon, that can possibly damage confidence. So for me, the lead in is all about just generating ideas, generating student chit chat, getting some energy going, and making sure my learners are enthusiastic. But certainly when they are giving you answers to other questions, you might want to be able to listen out. And if you can quickly fix it, this is why I think that use of the finger technique is quite helpful, because you can help them with missing words or extra syllables or swapping sounds, something like this. And then maybe as well, when you are doing the content feedback, if there's been some sort of extension task after a reading or a listening, and the students are sharing their ideas, listen to the meaning of what they're saying for sure. And then maybe you can just have that bit of confidence to go, you know what, that was a great point you made, but maybe could you say this word a little differently to help us really make sure that your English is accurate. So I think I'd be letting the lead in just flow, and maybe looking for opportunities throughout the lesson, but particularly after some sort of speaking or fluency activity at the end. And the more you do it, the better you get and the faster you get. And also, your learners as well. So you know that some learners might like being corrected, might want to be corrected. And this goes back to a couple of people saying, oh, what am I putting on the spot? I think choral drilling is really important because everybody needs to get better. But with your individual drilling, or your opportunistic drilling, or your immediate error correction, you as a teacher can hopefully get the sense of what the balance is, of whether this student is going to welcome, the feedback, or whether or not maybe for this particular shy student, the fact that they spoke is just going to be good enough for today.
Yeah, Susie, I'm just listening to you. Sorry, again, I feel like I'm hogging the session, but I just have one more question. I was just
Sure.
listening to you. Something came to my mind.
Mm.
Like we often look for little fillers, right, for our lessons, and like 2 to 5 minute activities, right, that we use, I don't know, twice, 3 times throughout the lesson.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, how about if we just kind of make a note of pronunciation errors as we go along, and then every, say, 10 minutes, we have a 2-minute filler, which is effectively a drilling session. And then you can kind of plan it into your lesson in the sense that every single drilling session, every single filler will use a different drilling technique, right? So you could
Yeah.
do a 2-minute session where you back chain. You can do another 2-minute session, another 2-minute filler, not session, where you use split drilling, like, just to kind of intercept the lesson. Okay, like every 10 minutes there is a drilling session. How do you think this would work? How do you
I think
think?
that's a really good idea, Gabby. Absolutely. Especially if you're teaching learners for things like 60-minute sessions.
Hmm,
On the CELTA, it could be 40 or 45 minutes and time goes very quickly. But if you've got that hour, as you say, you've got those sort of 2 or 3 minutes here and there where it could
yeah,
be a fantastic opportunity
yeah,
just to kind of go back and do some remedial work on the errors that you heard so that you
yeah,
don't interrupt that meaningful communication that the students are experiencing. And I
yeah,
think, yeah, because you can vary it, even if you just do it twice per lesson, you can have a go with your whispering drilling and your shouty drilling, which is quite fun and very, very simple to do. Or, if you're in a physical classroom, the Mexican wave drilling is also really good fun. So thinking about, stresses on words or sentence stress. So yeah, I think that's a great technique that I would encourage new teachers to try. As you say, just note down some ideas as the lesson is progressing. And then when you find yourself between activities or with a minute or two to spare, think about the different techniques that you've been exposed to and
yeah.
have a go at popping 2 or 3 minutes of class. Great
So
idea.
I almost feel like, students, you can even train your students. They will be begging you for those little, 2-minute drilling sessions.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. That
And
brings me on to something
they
about.
expect
Hello.
it.
Sorry,
Yeah,
say that again, Gabby.
I said, if you make it fun, students will be begging you for these 2-minute
Mhm.
sessions, because they kind of will be expecting it. You can get them up as well. You can get students up. You can
Mhm.
even nominate a student to drill the rest of the class. I mean, one of the stronger students.
Sure.
So it could be a lot of fun, and we could train our students to actually expect it in the lesson and to ask for
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and I think that it really helps because very often students need to unlearn bad pronunciation habits, and so reminding them um, almost all the time, what was off, and
Mhm.
either way you can just snip your fingers, or
Yeah.
whatever. So and you just train them in a way,
Absolutely. And for me,
and
it's like really silly little things as well.
yeah,
There's another question in the Q&A box from Maria about my Arabic student. She's asking, do I think that Arabic students have more difficulty when drilling the pronunciation of English than other students? In some ways, yes. But that's because English is quite a movie language. It's quite a mobile language. You need to have, quite an active mouth in order for your pronunciation to be quite good. And so even just simple little mouth exercises, Arabic can often be spoken actually just with quite closed lips and you can make yourself understood. Whereas in English, that just is mumbling to us. So sometimes with my Arabic students, just to break the ice, we'll do things like silly face shapes of going, as if you were in play school going, open your mouth to eat the world's biggest apple, ah, 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 ah. Okay, it's the end of school photograph. So you've got to say cheese, give me the biggest smile that you can. E, 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 e. Yeah, so just making them have practice of getting their mouths really mobile. And then as you're doing pronunciation, I always say to them, look, when you watch me, you don't go, ha ha ha, look at her crazy face. Although you might, but probably what you do is go, wow, actually, my teacher's got really clear pronunciation. So I think that by modeling that yourself and by not being afraid to be a little bit silly and a little bit show-offy, that just encourages the students to have fun with it. And exactly as you mentioned, Gabby, I tend to find that they tend to want to go, is this right, teacher? Tell me, teacher. Correct me, teacher. So they're wanting to get it right. They're wanting to do better, which is lovely to hear, obviously.
Yes, and also as in Flora's session, there were 4 times when she stopped and used drilling to prepare students for the next phase of the lesson. But she kept these sessions short. So, you know, then students can just feel more enthusiastic and excited about doing this, because it doesn't become boring.
Yeah, and drilling is really intense, actually. So even that sort of 45, 60 seconds, it's a very intense experience because your whole focus is on your teacher and yourself. And so I often find, if I'm doing it with CELTA trainees in particular, you know, we'll just do a quick sort of 60-second or 2-minute chunk of drilling, and then afterwards they're like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. And that's doing it in our mother tongue. So, you know, it is really challenging for the learners. And I think the audio snippets that we heard prove that they find it very challenging. And that's another thing that I want to recommend as well, that a lot of newly qualified teachers feel a little bit embarrassed, thinking, oh, I don't want to sound patronizing, or I don't want to embarrass my students. But actually, I find that the opposite is true, that students really get into drilling. They really appreciate it. They really enjoy it. And then I often find, if I'm just delivering a normal lesson and teaching a little bit of vocabulary, the students just start mimicking me. And so if you notice that's happening in your students, take that as the cue for, do you know what? They're having a go. Let's make this a thing. Let's make it a 45-second thing where, you know, we can do a little bit of individual and choral practice. So if when you're teaching that you see your students moving their mouths around or practicing the shape of words, use that as a clue to tell you they wouldn't mind a bit of drilling at this point in the lesson.
But I think the teacher's attitude is super important in this. So if they see that I find it very important, then they will just stay with me. Because otherwise, if I do it half-heartedly, then they can feel it and they may think that, oh, it's not that important. So why are we, you know, wasting time doing this practice?
Absolutely. And I think that's sometimes maybe why people find drilling over online forums a little bit more challenging than maybe you would in a physical classroom. You know, in a physical classroom, I can sweep the room with my eyes. You know, in Zoom, I can't do that. In a physical classroom, I've got this kind of helicopter gesture that I tend to use when I want everybody. And then I just use my hands to invite individual students, because what I want to do when I'm drilling is just making the amount of teacher talking time really, really short and almost nothing, just using non-verbal gestures, so I can keep the drilling fast and snappy. The more I start talking, the slower it gets, and I don't really want that. Whereas, of course, on Zoom, I have to use people's names because I can't make eye contact with individual students. And you need to find a way of kind of like instructing them, you know, exactly like a conductor of an orchestra. So it could be things like, first it's my turn to speak, now it's your turn to speak, or now it's my turn, now it's your turn, or first of all, listen, okay, second of all, speak. So finding some way of getting your students to work with a cue, you know, whether it's snappy fingers or clapping hands, or Bartolo mentioned in the chat box, integrating music into drilling. So I'd love to hear maybe a bit more about that, Bartolo. Yes, Maria, being the conductor, exactly. I often talk about my CELTA trainees in this way, like we're all an orchestra. We're all incredibly talented, and we've all got a lot to offer individually. We just need a nominal leader of somebody who can drive the lesson forward. So I often think of our teacher's job as being like a conductor, that we've got incredibly talented individuals in front of us, and it's our job as a nominal leader just to kind of like drive them towards the lesson aim. And I think your learners as well look to you for that kind of leadership, that kind of guidance. So I think, as Hedvig just mentioned, if you feel really shy and embarrassed about drilling and you're not selling it, the students can kind of sense that. So they look to you to be, you know, an assertive leader. And I think, you know, drilling is where you can really show that, you know, that control, if you like. Sorry, Bartolo, I didn't mean to freak you out and take you by surprise. I'm just quite interested because, yeah, you mentioned music and drilling. So definitely, I think the clapping or the snapping is something that I often use, and often particularly interestingly for conditionals, because if you choose the right sentences, it's got a really good rhythm. And so that's where I do my little conditionals dance. So, you know, like if I knew you were coming, I'd have baked you a cake. And I get my students to do the snapping or the clapping. And then if we're all in time, and again, over Zoom, that's quite challenging because there could be like microsecond delays, which doesn't always lend for, you know, beautiful choral drilling. But if you do get the rhythm spot on, then you'll find yourself having a little bit of a dance. And if I knew you were coming, I'd have baked you a cake. If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked you a cake. So yeah, I'd be interested to find out, Bartolo, your experience of using rhythm or music in the classroom.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I can hear you now.
Susie, sorry about
Hi.
that. I was hypnotized about your energy. And every
Thank
time
you.
you speak, I'm feeling like a fireworks of idea. Yeah, we can do this.
Great.
So good. You reminded me of a song, Santa Esmeralda, and there was a lot of clapping in that song. I don't know if you remember that, but I think clapping is a good idea. I had some problems with a Brazilian student once. She was an adult, and she was very shy, and she didn't really want to talk, but she liked to dance. So at a certain point, I decided that we will have a little dance together. And I took her and I started to let her focus on her feet instead of the word.
Great.
And so I told her that we had to move without stopping. And for each movement, she had to repeat what I was saying. And this way was a lot easier because she was focusing on the dancing more than on the speaking. And I think this is a good idea.
That's so smart. Yeah, definitely. I think anything that you say just pulls the attention away from the student. So they feel a little bit less self-conscious is a really positive thing. And for me, that's why choral drilling really works, because nobody is looking at another student in the class. Everybody is like focusing front and center on, you know, what the teacher is doing, the shape of the mouth, how it's moving. And in the past as well, I've even gone as far as to get students to bring in like a little hand mirror or, you know, operate the selfie side of their phone. And then people are just kind of like looking at themselves, and then we're practicing mouth shapes and different sounds. And again, that kind of like reduces a little bit of self-consciousness because your phone is literally in front of your face, so nobody else can see what you're doing. But I think exactly you said, Bartolo, creative teachers will find a way of helping their students with whatever methods appear to them, which is really, really great to hear.
Thank you very much for the compliments and
Thank you.
good workshop as always.
Thank you. I wonder if anybody else has questions out there, or if people want to raise their hands and make some comments about any drilling that they already do, or anything they've been inspired to try, or something they'd like more information on or some clarity on. This is your raising your hand time. Don't be shy.
Yeah, and I think that students can see early on that, you know, so when we learn new language, either any grammar item or grammatical item or lexical item, just knowing the meaning and the form, you know, is not enough.
It's not enough, yeah.
Because it does not give them the confidence to participate in conversations. And also one more thing, just to show the link between pronunciation and all language skills is one from listening. You know, when I prepare my students for exams, for instance, and we are preparing for the listening subtest, and they miss an answer. And when we clarify what the missing answer is, they look at the word and they say, "Oh, but I know this word," but they do not know the pronunciation, the correct pronunciation of the word, and they expect something different to be heard, and that's why they can, you know, just really miss answers. So this is so important. Like,
yeah.
And
I totally agree with that, Hedvig, especially as well because, you know, for the higher levels, this is where the importance of linking comes into things, because when you see words written down in a sentence or a question, you know, every word is separate and individual, but the sound that that creates could be something completely different from what your students are expecting. And so, as you mentioned, like knowing a word isn't about just knowing the meaning or knowing how to read it. It's also being able to recognize it when it's spoken and then being able to reproduce it themselves with, you know, with accurate pronunciation. So yeah, absolutely. I just think there's something there from Bartolo about, is it Bartolo or is it Gabby? I couldn't see, about recognition.
That's
So
Gabi.
yeah.
Mhm.
Was that you?
Gabi, it's Gabi. Gabi's command.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually have a kind of drilling task that I love using. It's not in that traditional sense of drilling, but I just love that. So when we have, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes left at the end of the lesson, I ask my students to give me lexical items from the lesson that they have found either new, they haven't known before, or they have found difficult. And I just put them on the whiteboard. This happens in face-to-face classroom environment. So I put the words random, topsy-turvy on the whiteboard, diagonally, all over the place. I would go up to 10 words, so no more than 10 words. And so what we do is that I make sure that they remember, how to pronounce them accurately. So I point at one word, and I just instruct them to listen and repeat after me. So we have a look at all the words, and then I just point at one, and then I ask the students to say what it is, and then I remove that word, and with a sponge, let's say. So there's an empty space there. So I'm pointing at the empty space. They are saying what the word was there, and I'm pointing to another word, and then I remove the second word as well. I'm pointing back to space 1. They say what it was, space 2, word 3, space 1, space 2, word 3. Okay, I remove word 3, space 1, space 2, space 3, word 4. So
Wow.
you get what it is. And this is just so exciting. The second the students realize, what's happening, like, is she serious?
The word is running away.
Is she going to remove all the words? Like, really? Seriously? Yes, she's serious. And it's just amazing. By the end, you have a blank whiteboard, pointing at random, places on the whiteboard, and everybody's saying, the exact same word. And
that's incredible.
Amazing.
That's fantastic. So I imagine they find that pretty challenging, but you know what? That's great training for the short-term memory loss that people often experience when you're trying to do drilling. As we saw in the audios, even if it's just one particular sentence, the short-term memory loss means that it doesn't sort of stay in there very well. So I think anything that we can do to help them with, with repetition and to make that an integral part of the class. So as you say, they expect it, they engage in it, they wanna join in and do it. I think that's a fantastic idea to try at the end of a lesson.
Yeah, and they may remember more.
Yes,
hopefully.
absolutely.
God knows, but hopefully. And so, Susie, when it comes to, because we cannot, give everything to our students during the lessons. So it's, we can do as much as we can, but what can we suggest as teachers, or recommend for students to use? I don't know, any applications or anything that you know.
I think
about.
for me, the most sensible thing is encouraging them to listen to songs. I think songs is the best realistic and practical way to get your students practicing pronunciation, but without being bored. There's lots of different apps where you've got the phonemic chart and you can push sounds and you can copy the random sounds. And I mean, that's fine. That's great for the sort of remedial basic practice, but that's not how we communicate. That's not how language works. So I think in order for them to get more confident, listening to whatever is in the media at the moment and then singing along to it, it's really easy these days with the internet to get the lyrics online. On YouTube, you often find like the videos with the lyrics at the bottom, which is an even better way to get people to join in. But I think because they're working with rhythm and stress and music, and they're having to, squash words together, stretch words out, they also have to think about rhyming sounds as well. And if they're looking at lyrics, that often helps them with the sound versus the spelling of the word, which of course we know in English, there's often no relationship between what it looks like and how it sounds. So I think if I just wanted my students to be autonomous in getting better, I think probably songs is the one thing I would recommend.
I actually have a dear friend in her 50s now, and she came to the UK in her 20s, not really speaking the language at all. She's very artistic and musical, and she learned English through listening to songs, and her pronunciation is just amazing. just I like, wow,
Yeah.
fantastic. And actually, you mentioned phonemic chart, and I have a question about that as well. Do you encourage your trainees to use the phonemic chart when they, you know, work on pronunciation, drilling, for instance, and then so how, or is it important to be incorporated in that part of the lesson?
Yeah, Gabby's just written something similar in the chat box about showing sounds using phonemic script. For me, I can integrate phonetics into my lessons when I feel it's important. I don't think it's necessary always to write the entire phonemic word. You know, it's not always necessary. It could just be a particular sound that the students are having problems with. Often candidates and newly qualified teachers are a little bit scared of the International Phonemic Alphabet, the IPA, because they're not quite familiar yet with, you know, making the shapes, and especially typing things online, that can be quite challenging. But if you can teach your students to recognize some phonemes, particularly the vowel sounds, what you're doing them is giving them independence and autonomy to be able to manage pronunciation away from you. You know, I'm sure lots of students would love it if I was sat on their shoulders the entire time, possibly slightly heavy, but you know, I can't be there all the time. But if I can teach my students to be able to recognize different shapes and sounds of phonemes, that means when they look in a dictionary, they can figure out what it's trying to say. Although there are lots of online dictionaries now where you can also click on the word and have somebody pronounce it. But again, I'm mindful that sometimes they sound like alien robots as opposed to, you know, natural, rapid, you know, native speaker speech. So I definitely think that the phonemic chart is important, but for me, it's not the be all and end all. For the student to be able to say the sound and for other people to be able to recognize what they're saying is important. So Gabby maybe mentioned the idea of like recording students, which I think is quite a nice idea. I often might give that as homework. You know, these days, everybody has a smartphone, you know, smartphones have the technology. So it's quite a nice idea if you can get them either in breakout rooms, they can maybe record their conversations with each other. And then for homework, you can have them listen and seeing if they can, like, you know, pick out 2 or 3 areas of pronunciation they want to work on. It's challenging as a teacher to kind of manage that, obviously, because if everybody in your class has got a little bit of a recording, as a teacher, unless you've got one lesson a week where you can just build a lesson around that, that's kind of challenging to manage. So I think that's the kind of thing that you can encourage the students to do at home, is to just listen back and then maybe just kind of like, you know, practice having a similar conversation just with improved pronunciation maybe. And again, this is why I think it's so important for classroom management that when we're getting our students to do some kind of talking task or fluency task, rather than kind of like, you know, have the task go on for 15 minutes, which is an enormous stretch of time, possibly unmanageable for a lot of learners, particularly at lower levels, but maybe they can have a conversation for 3 minutes and then we can move them around to talk to different people, and then they can have the same conversation but with somebody different. So they found themselves rehearsing the content of what they were saying, and now they can just practice a bit more fluently. So they're staying on the same topic, but with new ideas. So if, for example, you've got 12 people and you do that with groups of 3, that means you can fill your 15 minutes of talking time really easily just by clever classroom management of manipulating different pairs every, you know, 3 or 4 minutes or so. So that's what I think is really important for learners as well, that as a teacher, we do our utmost to build in a decent amount of language practice time where the students have the opportunity to practice with choral drilling before the activity, go into the activity with some people to have a go at it, learn from the mistakes they made or build their confidence, and then go and try the activity again with somebody new, but speaking on a similar topic. And that way, hopefully, they can start to monitor and then self-correct. And I've certainly seen evidence of peer correction taking place between students as well, where they can hear if one person is making a mistake and they want to help them improve.
That's great. And Susie, what do you think about shadow reading? Do you, I don't know, teach your trainees or?
Not a fan. Not a
fan?
fan. I don't think that is helpful for learners. You know, if you gave me a page of Portuguese, I could probably read it. What it says, no idea. You know, for me, I mean, again, if students are doing it at home, maybe audiobooks, you know, and a physical book, and maybe doing it that way. But that, I think, is something that I would work on, let them doing outside the classroom as opposed to inside the classroom. There's a question in the chat box, Hedy, do you see about what's shadow reading? Do you want to explain a bit more about that?
Yes, I mean, shadow reading is when you have a text, let's say it can be a listening text, and you have the script of the listening task, and you play the recording, and you ask students to be led by the speaker in a way that you stay, I don't know, 3, 4 words, 2, 3, 4 words behind the speaker, but just trying to copy the rhythm of the language and the speed of the speaker as well. So it's like speaking together with the speaker as if you were a parrot, staying very close to the speaker. And I think it's very difficult as well. So I would use that probably in class with a text that the students are familiar with. And actually, it's very interesting because what I do is when I use this technique, then I may not even play the whole listening text. I will just pick, let's say, a paragraph and play that, do the shadow reading with the students. And let's say for the first time, it's most of the time it's horrible the way it goes. But then for the third or the fourth time, it's just amazing. And I ask them that now, if you consider yourself an advanced shadow reader, then you can even close your eyes and then do it that way. So but it's like singing songs.
Yeah, and I think it's different strokes for different folks. I mean, every teacher is different, every class is different, and some teachers have, like, you know, back pocket tricks that they use on a really regular basis that other teachers have never heard of, and other teachers are using techniques that I particularly might not be a fan of, but that works really well in that particular class. I think for me, because if the aim of that lesson, for example, was listening, I'd want to make sure that they had the listening for gist, they had the listening for detail, and then they had lots and lots of talking time. And if I had extra time, maybe, you know, I would give them the tape script and let them listen and look. But more often than not, I would just extend the speaking activity and then make sure I can build in some delayed error correction and some immediate error correction as well. So for me, I think anything that involves, like, you know, reading and mouthing, I just would, for me personally, I don't think I can sell it because I'm not a believer. So that's part of it. You know, a different teacher who definitely believes it benefits their learners will have a totally different take on it. But I think that the students aren't going to be able to hear themselves very clearly. You know, sometimes they can't, you know, get in tune properly and they miss the rhythms and the stress. Maybe, you know, they're having issues with their reading if they're poor readers. So for me, there are more issues against than there are issues for. But I definitely think that, like I said, it's different things for different people. So yeah, let's maybe hear from some of the panelists. Anybody want to maybe say something about that? Annalie, let's hear from you. I have to have a disclaimer. I know Annalie and also Iris is out there as well. Hello, Iris. They were girls on a previous CELTA course. I'm delighted that you guys came to today, and I'm delighted, Annalie, that you've registered as well for gallery teachers. Well done, you. So Annalie, since you've been teaching, how are you managing with drilling and using different techniques in the classroom? Annalie, can we give her a voice?
Yes.
Oh, I got a voice.
Yay,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Susie.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Likewise.
Very useful session.
Thank you.
I'm really enjoying it. But yes, no, I just commented about the shadow reading. I have never heard of this before and never used it, and I really can't see the benefits. But I'm willing to read up on it and see what it could be good for.
What do you use in your classrooms when you're practicing drilling? What different techniques have you picked up?
I only do online one-to-one lessons at the moment. So it's easier to do drilling. Like previously you mentioned about, you know, doing it online setting can be like Zoom. It can be chaos, delays, all of that.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just
so one-to-one takes that problem away for you.
Exactly. So it's been easier, and it's definitely, I've noticed some students absolutely love it and they want it.
Yeah.
They ask for it. So yes, using the Choral, I do like to do silly voices. I am
especially working with kids as well. That's quite fun.
Yes. I don't teach kids actually. I do I do teach adults, but some of them are just fun and they love it. And do like to bring some people out of their shell. So I think that helps a lot.
Definitely.
Yes,
I think a little
definitely.
bit of drama can help people come out of their shells, and
Ooh,
I think that's only like, you know, a
yes.
positive thing. And you know, who doesn't need more drama in their life? Drama and jazz hands, people. Drama and jazz hands. That's what we need. But I think that's the key thing to take away from the session today, is that, you know, don't underestimate the importance of drilling, and also don't underestimate the amount that the students want it. You know, I think that sometimes our own prejudices and perceptions can cloud the reality of what's in front of us. So I think, you know, watch out for those little cues of the students secretly trying to write things down, or, you know, mumbling along with you when you're teaching new words, or if they're doing it, you know, to an audio and a reading and a listening, and they seem to want the opportunity to speak, then, you know, give the shadow reading a try. I think be led by your learners, but, you know, never be afraid to have a go at drilling, because I really think the learners need it, enjoy it, and certainly benefit from it.